Hello, music fans. I'm here to count down my 10 favorite new album releases from November 2022, mostly in the prog rock and prog metal genres. In fact, pretty much exclusively in those genres except for my number one, which is kind of hard to categorize genre wise. So let's jump right in with my number 10. And a quick caveat before I jump in, actually, just because this is my 10th favorite album released in November doesn't take away from its greatness. I listened to 27 new releases in November, and I intentionally seek out releases that I think will be awesome. So to be in my top 10 is an achievement. This album, number 10, is by the band Dockers Guild, and it's called The Mystic Technocracy Season 2, The Age of Entropy. It's a progressive rock opera with some metal influences. It's their third album. If you're a fan of bands like Ayreon and Star One, you should like this. A lot of the songs are in English, but some are in other languages like French. There's definitely some concept here. There's some spoken word parts. I didn't really follow the whole story, but I get some sci-fi vibes from it. So if you're a fan of Coheed and Cambria, you might like this. It's almost all clean singing and has influences from classic 70s prog like Yes, but there are a couple of short moments with death growls that remind me of Orphan Land. My number 9 is by the band Dirtpoor Robins. It's called Queen of the Night. This is progressive rock with cinematic and musical theater vibes. It's their 8th album. Great female vocals on this album. Even though it's prog rock, it leans heavily into the show tunes and musical theaters vibe. And it accompanies a film they made, so it's kind of like a soundtrack. And I heard about this album from Nathan on Shuffle's channel, and he rightly calls out that it's reminiscent of when the Deer Hunter goes into their crooner musical theater show tunes vibe. My number 8, I think, is In the Woods and their album Diversum. This is progressive metal with avant-garde, atmospheric black metal, traditional heavy metal, and progressive rock influences. Blends a lot of different styles of metal together in a beautiful emotional ride of an album. The clean vocals sound epic and are really catchy. The screams sound evil and depressed and are somewhere between black metal and death metal. My number 7 is by the band Elder, and it's called Innate Passage. This is psychedelic progressive stoner rock with some doom metal influences. It's their 7th album, and it's the only album of theirs that I've heard of, but it sounds like this band would be like if Mastodon and Baroness met up with Catatonia and Incubus, and it's really great stuff. Number 6 is by the band Threshold, and it's called Dividing Lines. It's progressive metal. It's their 12th album, and I'm very surprised I'd never heard of this band before. They started back in 1988. They put out their first album in the early 90s. I knew they'd be right up my alley when I heard the one single. The whole album was solid. It's progressive metal, but it doesn't have any of the extreme metal like metalcore, death metal, or black metal influences. So it's good for people who want to get into progressive metal but don't like screaming vocals, as this doesn't really have any of those. So if you're a fan of bands like Dream Theater, Pain of Salvation, and Symphony X, you might like this. My number 5 is by the band The Offering, and it's called Seeing the Elephant. And this is progressive metalcore with a bit more of the gent style, some deathcore influences, heavy metal influences, and power metal influences in here too. It's their 2nd album. It sounds very epic, very well written and performed, good vocal delivery, great guitar solos on this one too. Definitely some wild shredding here. The guitar riffs are typically genty, but there are also some high-pitched squealing dive bomb type guitar parts as well, which are fun. My number 4 is by Zeke Sky, and it's called Intergalactic Demon King, and this is progressive metal as well. It's his 2nd album, and this Zeke guy can shred too. He plays a mean guitar. He writes really cool prog metal music. In the music video that I saw, he is playing really fast guitar parts while also singing. And I think if he can pull that off live, that's just impressive multitasking. The guitar playing reminds me of Protest the Hero and the Human Abstract. He sings some great melodic hooks as well, and he lets out intense screams from time to time as well. So check it out if you're a fan of Protest the Hero, The Human Abstract, and bands like that. Now my number 3 of the month is by Devin Townsend, and it's called Lightwork. And this is more like art rock. It's not as proggy as some of his other stuff. It's not as metal as some of his other stuff, but it still has a bit of metal influence as well as progressive influence, as well as some more pop influence. This is kind of his more accessible album. One of the most accessible albums he's ever done. Kind of pretty normal, like standard music audiences could listen to this and not think it's too weird. It's his 21st album by my count, but he has a hard discography to count because he's used a half dozen different band names during his career, like Devin Townsend Band, Devin Townsend Project, Devin Townsend, Punky Brewster, Ocean Machine, and I'm not counting Casualties of Cool and Strapping Young Lad releases in that 21. But this was one of my most anticipated releases for the fourth quarter of the year here, along with some other releases from King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, as well as the one that ended up being my number 1. Devin Townsend is just one of the best singers in the rock and metal world today, and I love how he's such a shapeshifter with his styles. This album is just catchier, poppier, and a bit less heavy than usual, but it's still got a couple heavy moments. It's a bit more straightforward rock, but in the past, he's done everything from extreme metal to progressive rock to ambient meditation music to country. The standout tracks on this are Lightworker and Celestial Signals, the latter of which was released on Disc 2 of Transcendence back in 2016 as a bonus track. And the album proper here contains 10 tracks, but there's also a deluxe edition with a bonus disc called Nightwork, which contains 10 more original songs, and I recommend all of those as well. So do yourself a favor and check out the deluxe version that has all those extra songs, because they're all really great too. My number 2 is by David Maxim Micic, and it's called Below 4, and this is mostly instrumental progressive metal. It's his 5th album. There are some tracks that feature guest vocalists, mostly the amazing Alexandra Gielmas, who's a part of David's band Sordid Pink, which was previously called Destiny Potato. There's a little bit of gent guitar playing here, but there's also a lot of ambient stuff and really beautiful, peaceful, and serene sounds. Some parts sound like they have Asian music influences, and I was just surprised by how amazing this was when I listened to it. I know and love his work with his band Sordid Pink and Destiny Potato, but I never really got into his solo albums until now. But as soon as I heard this, I immediately went back and listened to Bilo or Bilo, I don't know how to pronounce it, 3, 2, and 1, and his album Who Bit the Moon, and all of those are great. He also has a couple EPs that are really solid too, but I do think Bilo 4 might be his best solo album yet. And now my number 1 of November is by the band He Is Legend, and it's called Endless Hallway. And the genre here I'd say is just hard rock, but they combine so many influences that they're hard to categorize. They've got metal influences in there, hardcore, alternative rock, psychedelic, sludge metal, southern rock, and progressive influences all thrown in together. This is their 7th album, and this was my most anticipated album of the quarter because I love everything that He Is Legend has released throughout their career. I think they're a highly underrated band that deserves to be more popular. Their sound has evolved quite a bit over their career, from their post-hardcore metalcore beginnings to hard rock to heavy metal to progressive to experimental to stoner rock, alternative rock, psychedelic rock, and sludge metal to southern rock. So if you put all those styles in a mixing pot, you have the new He Is Legend sound. I love how they do tempo and dynamic changes throughout the album. The vocals here are great. They're mostly catchy and melodic singing with a bit of a rasp to them, but the occasional intense scream. However, I think even people who aren't into screaming vocals could like this album, as the screams are used sparingly. The chugging guitars just make me groove and bang my head. They kind of have almost a djenty sound to them, but I would never really consider He Is Legend a djent band. But they do kind of have some low tuning chugs. But they also have those nice ambient leads and textures in their songs. And they're just one of the most consistently solid bands out there. While I don't think they've ever made an album that I consider 10 out of 10, I think pretty much all 7 of their albums are 9 out of 10s, and to release 7 9 out of 10 albums in a row is just really good. So as of right now, this is in my top 5 albums of the year so far, and that's saying a lot because I've listened to like 270 or so new albums this year, or maybe even a bit more. The riffs, the melodies, the grooves are just to die for here. So I highly recommend it. Hope you enjoyed this top 10 new releases of November video, and hope you found something new to check out and enjoy here. Until next time, peace out.